Welcome to KBS World Radio. You're now tuned in to Korea24's Korea Book Club, where we explore the world of Korean literature. This is our weekend replay edition, playing back our book segment from Wednesday's show. We hope you enjoy it. I'm your host, Kwon Jang-woo. Barry, hello. It's great to see you as always.
Yes, good evening.
Okay, so what book do you have for us this week?
So tonight we're reviewing a novel called Another Man's City. The Korean title is 낯익은 타인들의 도시, and the writer is Choi In-ho. It was translated by Bruce and Ju-Chan Fulton and published in 2014 as part of the Dalkey Archive Library of Modern Korean Literature. It was originally published in Korea in 2011, and it was Choi's last completed work before he died after fighting throat cancer, which he'd been suffering from for several years. And Choi, a very famous writer here in Korea, he had a long, hugely successful career, and he debuted when he was just 18 years old with a story called Patient Apprentice. And over the course of his career, he was famous for writing about industrialization and consumerism that obviously occurred, during his adulthood in Korea. And later on in life, his work developed to reflect the political environment and his sort of critiques of the repressive consequences of it in the 1980s. And then later, still, he became interested in Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy and the ancient history of Korea. So a very long career with lots of different periods in it that he wrote about different things, and he very highly celebrated. His final work that we're talking about today, Another Man's City, it's a surreal story about a man who realizes the world around him is being manipulated.
Yes, Choi is, as you said, a beloved writer in Korea with legions of fans who followed him throughout his career. His novels were bestsellers for over almost 5 decades and are still widely read today. In fact, one testament to his success is the fact that at least 19 of his works have been adapted into films, many of which he wrote the screenplays for as well. But going back to today's work, Another Man's City, it was his final novel, as you mentioned. So what is Choi writing about here?
Right, so this story is this is a novel that has many reference points or influences that we could point to, and Choi is clearly deliberately drawing on and following in the footsteps of some other writers such as Franz Kafka or Kazuo Ishiguro or Haruki Murakami, and even George Orwell's in there as well in the story. And the story, it's set over the course of a weekend. A man called K wakes up at 7 a.m. on Saturday morning. He was out drinking the night before, blacked out, and can't remember a period of around 90 minutes from that evening. And as he goes about his morning routine, he realizes that he's lost his phone. And more importantly, as this morning progresses, as he interacts with his wife and his daughter and so on, he comes to suspect that something is not quite right. The world has been changed in some fundamental way, and he becomes convinced that he's inhabiting a different reality from the day before, that he's in some kind of simulation or some kind of alternate representation of the world. And he thinks to himself, where had this string of events begun? Or was he imagining this? No, it was real, and the tricks had started last night. He shook his head. Yes, he was under an illusion. The visible world was real, but his brain had processed it into something distorted. However, as the morning goes on and the day goes on, he becomes increasingly paranoid and increasingly convinced that some unseen force is manipulating him. So why is this happening to him? What does it mean? And to solve this mystery, Kay sets out to find his lost phone in an attempt to uncover what happened during these 90 minutes that he was blacked out, because this seems the key to understanding his predicament.
Right, so this is a sort of paranoid conspiracy thriller set in Seoul, then. It sounds like a novel which has some cinematic influences as well. Some of the plot points there reminds me of things like The Matrix or The Truman Show, maybe. So what do you think then Che was trying to say with these elements?
Right, yeah. So it is very much in the mold of those films and films like that. And Che does something extremely enjoyable in this book. He turns this sort of existential inquiry into the nature of reality, the nature of your own consciousness into a kind of a gripping page turner, kind of a thriller in a way. I think many of us sometimes look out the window at the bustling, hyper-modern Seoul with its shining skyscrapers and the millions of people rushing to and fro, and think this can't be real, right? How is this modern world we live in possible at all? How ridiculous and implausible it all seems that it exists at all. And Che is definitely tapping into that idea, and he gives it what I thought a very satisfying expression in this sort of journey that Kay has over the weekend as he explores Seoul, Seoul in 2010 in search of his phone. But then it's also about this fear that I think many of us have, and which is something which has become much more of a talking point in the decade since the book was published. It's a very sort of prescient novel in that sense. This idea that the world around us is being manipulated somehow. It doesn't matter who you vote for or support, the state is all powerful and tracking you at all times. Despite what you think, you're never free from the watchful eye of Big Brother. And of course that idea too, that's only increased, right, since Che wrote the novel. If you think about the last few years with digital tracking and these types of things.
Sure.
But then again, if we shift our view again slightly, the novel could be like a satire about the roles that we occupy in our lives. You're as a parent, as a colleague, as a lover, as a husband, as whatever your roles in life are. This is a novel that it offers itself up for interpretation, and I think that's one of the pleasures of it. But I think one of the most convincing interpretations might be to do with Che's religious beliefs.
Wow, so there are some quite modern themes in there as well, but that religious aspect sounds interesting. So while Che was interested in and wrote about Buddhism, he was actually a devout Catholic for much of his life, I understand. He converted to Catholicism in the mid-1980s. With that in mind then, how do you think his religious belief perhaps changes our interpretation of Another Man's City?
Yeah, right. So I think that his Catholicism might be the key to understanding what he was doing with this novel. So there's an extended section towards the end of the book, and I think that reveals what he was really trying to get at, what Che was aiming for with this story. So Kay visits a Catholic church in one of the final chapters, and he's trying to reckon with the journey that he's been on, these, the various things that have happened to him, that he's learned, and these sort of experiences that he's had over this very strange weekend. And it's here that Che brings, several elements of the story together. And I think really what he's asking is, what does it mean to live a good life? How do we evaluate whether or not we've lived a good life, a moral life, an ethical life? And I think it's important to note Che wrote this book over a period of 2 months. And this was after he had his first sort of battle with throat cancer, his first treatment for throat cancer. And he perhaps knew that he didn't have long left, or he might not have long left to live. And through this novel, he was, coming to terms with the end of life and looking back and wondering what it all meant. And Che said that this was the book he wanted to be remembered for. And it's a very thought-provoking, powerful novel to end his career with.
Once again, it's called Another Man's City by Choi In-ho. Barry, thank you for telling us about this book. We look forward to the next one. Take care, and we'll see you again next time.
Okay, take care.